Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating young woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hi everyone, thank you so much. My name is Sophie Otiende and I am based in Nairobi, Kenya. I define myself as a feminist, a teacher, and survivor advocate of human trafficking. From that definition, you can tell that I'm passionate about human trafficking, and specifically how it affects women and girls is something that is close to my heart because of my own personal experience. So I'm a survivor of what we call domestic servitude, and I believe I've always said that my story is not unique. My story is a very common African story. So there are many girls who go through what I went through every single day, and therefore the reason why I speak and I try to do what I do is so that many other girls, no other girl has to go through what I went through, which is forced labor, sexual abuse, and specifically at the hands of people who I know and people who are supposed to protect me. And the main reason why this occurred is as a result of, poverty, as a result of, traditions that we sometimes tolerate within our community, and also silence, because I think most of the things that happen, especially issues like trafficking, most of the issues that happen within our community, and there's so much silence around it, and there's so much, there's so much stigma around people talking about what has happened to them, especially in my case, what has happened to them when it's happened in the context of family. So for me, it's always important for me to really dig into that, but also I'm among the lucky people. I always say I'm a very, very privileged survivor leader in general because I had so much support from my family in terms of recovery, so much support in terms of coming back to myself after going through something very traumatic, and also so much support from my community in ensuring that I become the leader that I am. So apart from my traumatic story, I also am a huge advocate of what community can do in recovery, in reintegration. And I think all our solutions, if you think of any of our problems, it's rooted in us figuring out our shared humanity, one, and also just how we come together and support each other, because I've seen it work personally in my life. I don't think we can be able to become anything that is good without us seeing each other as human beings first and knowing that our survival is dependent on each other. So I'm a really, really strong advocate of community work and how community can help with empowerment, community can help with healing in general, because I think that the solutions we seek so desperately are within us. I know in our context we talk about Ubuntu, and for me it's such a strong value for me that we really see each other in that way. And yes, I founded an organization I've been working in the space for the past 10 years, in the counter trafficking space for the past 10 years. I founded a survivor collective called Azadi, and I'm currently the Chief Executive Officer of the Global Fund to End Modern Slavery. And all of it is really focused on, all that work is really focused on building a movement and raising, and really motivating people to rally around this issue, because it's a human rights abuse that's happening around us.
Okay, that was 4 minutes. I was hoping for more, but it's okay. We'll go into the
How many minutes were you hoping for?
I was hoping for 10 minutes. It's not easy to talk about yourself, hey?
No, I'm not good at talking about myself for 10
So
minutes, but I
need
can.
to teach you. I need to teach you, because that's a skill that is very, very useful, especially
Important.
when you want to get on the global platform. You're going to need to learn to tell your story, all right? So I want to mentor you going forwards to help you with that. But we'll go into the questions, and I'll have a bit more information. So when I ask a question, just pause a little bit. Then I will go into the background so that I have you on camera by yourself, so I can add to the 10 minutes, okay?
Okay.
All right. Sophie, thank you so much for coming online and sharing your story. Coming from Zimbabwe, I know exactly what you went through. I have cousins, I have relatives who went through similar experiences. And the sad thing, like you say, is it's happening within families. And sometimes families decide to look the other way instead of stepping in and helping an individual in a situation like that. So, how have you got to a point of finding healing for yourself and healing those relationships with family members who didn't support you?
I think healing within families is really, really hard. It's not, I think we don't talk a lot about how difficult it is to navigate healing and repair of relationships in the context of families, because there's an assumption of safety within families, there's an assumption of trust, there's an assumption of love, there's an assumption of community. And when it is broken in such a deep way, it's really hard to go back. I think for me, because my nuclear family wasn't affected, so my father, my mother, my brothers, that particular relationship wasn't affected, it was slightly easier for me, because I had like my nuclear, the core part of what I call family, and my perception of that wasn't affected. So I was able to heal fast within that context. And my father and my mother really protected me from anything else that was happening outside that, because I think they knew that it would be too much. As I've grown up and as I've started finding my voice, some of the challenges have been people, family members basically saying I shouldn't speak in public about the story, I shouldn't share the story, because of course, sharing the story means embarrassing the family, or it means something else, right? So the stigma around sharing my story and talking about what happened has been something that I've had to navigate. There are people who are comfortable with it, there are people who aren't comfortable with it. I think having really open discussions with people has helped. But also the other thing is there's an acceptance that some relationships cannot be repaired. That it's not going to be possible to mend a relationship so that we go back to how we were, especially if mending that relationship means that I I have to deny what my experience is. I have to hide things. I have to be in shame. And I think it's just, again, a question of what sort of relationships anyone wants to have. I think if the goal is for us to have healthy relationships, I think then you have to accept that you're not going to mend all the relationships. Something else that has really been good has been just knowing that I can choose my family, that there are people that I can choose, there are new people that are ready to welcome me in friendship and in other relationships.
So, as a leader in the fight against modern slavery, can you share how your organization's mission aligns with your personal values, particularly regarding diversity and inclusion?
I think I'll lead by giving a context. One of the challenges in the human trafficking and modern slavery space, like any other space, has been the issue of diversity and inclusion. Most of the organizations that are in the space are not led by impacted communities. So most of the organizations are led by people who've come in and then are studying the issue and then think these are the solutions. So when I came into the space 10 years ago, that was one of the things that for me was completely, challenging, because I would get into rooms and I would probably be the only survivor or sometimes the only Black person in the room. Yet when you look at the numbers of the people impacted by human trafficking, it's not the people represented in the room. That has changed over the past 10 years. I started Azadi, and I started Azadi specifically to address the issue of inclusion, the issue of saying that, survivors and impacted communities can come up with solutions that are valuable, can come up with, ideas that, can address this issue, and above all, can heal together. We really don't need saviors. We are our own community, we are our own. Solidarity is very different from rescue. And I think for me as a principal, I'm always striving towards how we can build solidarity with people who have been impacted rather than how we can rescue people. And so for me, Azadi represents that, because it was started by survivors, it's led by survivors, and everything about it is focused on that. The Global Fund is a bit different because I didn't start the organization. But one of the things that has been great is that when they brought me on, they said, develop a new strategy. Tell us how to think about this. And I think that's very powerful, especially for organizations that have been there for long, is also the admission that we've not been doing this well, then how can we do it well? And then make those significant strides to do so. So the new strategy is focused for the Global Fund to End Modern Slavery is focused on movement building and supporting impacted communities to lead the movement. So again, as I said, that's really a reflection of my values and what I think we should do in terms of addressing any sort of injustice. I don't think we're going to address any injustice without movements. And if you want to support any cause, whether it's trafficking, whether it's women's rights, whether it's racism, the way to support is through solidarity, and we do solidarity work in movement building. So for me, it's a no-brainer that that's what we should be doing. All of us should be doing.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because there's a lot of well-meaning organizations, people who are working in the space, and they mean well. They want to come and help, but they do come with that savior mentality, which is totally counterproductive in helping anyone in that situation. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. So your work is deeply rooted in feminist protection principles. How do these principles guide your organization's strategies in combating modern slavery?
When growing up and as an activist, because I became an activist very early, I think it was very important for me to find a theory and a language that grounded how I see things and how I address things. And feminism has really been important in doing that. I'm really a huge fan of Bell Hooks' work, that she has guided my thinking, definitely my thinking around what we call a love ethic when you're thinking about care. And I think sometimes that's the thing, is that when we forget that protection work is care work, and care work is actually about love. if we are being honest. And I know sometimes when we talk about things like love, people say, especially in my space, is that measurable? Is that objective? But the reality is that if you don't care for people, if you don't love people, you can't protect people in the right way. You can't, protection is not work that you can do in a mechanical way. You have to be moved. I can't say that I remember back when I used to go to church, one of the things that stood out when I would read Jesus, any story of Jesus, is that if you go back to any time Jesus performed a miracle, the first thing that happened is that he was moved by compassion. So for me, part of the problem with the protection work was that was missing, like people being moved by compassion rather than people being moved to want to. Being moved by compassion is me recognizing your humanity and knowing this should not happen to you, and therefore I want to protect you. And feminist principles really focus on that, as opposed to, oh my God, that is really terrible and I have all this power and then I can be able to save you. Because for me, protection work is also has to, the power dynamics shouldn't exist if we are doing it correctly, because you are also taking care of yourself as you're trying to take care of me. So I'm really focused, my work has really focused on that. One, making care as a practice and compassion and love. I say if ever I do anything in my life, I want to have a legacy of being able to articulate empathy, care in processes and systems. Because we've managed to somehow articulate racism, exclusion, and all these things in our systems and processes. I believe that it's possible to reverse engineer and do the same. And I believe feminism really gives that, and especially some of the work that Bell Hooks and other feminists have pioneered before. So I'm always really excited to talk about that.
So you advocate for embedding care and empathy within organizational practices. Can you share examples of how this approach has shaped your leadership and the culture at the Global Fund to End Modern Slavery?
Yes, I'll say that we are still a work in progress, right? Like any organization that has been operating in the past, we still have those elements of things that we need to change. But one of the first things that I did when I came in was really to do a top-down analysis, which is something I encourage any other organization to do, to really have an honest conversation about our processes and systems, how they exclude, how they don't care, how they don't think about the people that we are talking to, and to really be honest about that. Because I think sometimes in our quest to be efficient, which is an
Yes.
important thing, efficient and productive, we forget to care. And I think that's what we don't say, is that we've created systems that have prioritized production and efficiency rather than care. And I think if we want to do this, then we really have to all agree that care is the priority rather than sometimes production and efficiency. And so I think at the fund, that's one of the discussions that we've started having. How are our systems, how are our policies exclusive? So I'll give a good example, like our hiring practices. In the past, it was extremely difficult for you to be able to join the fund if you did not have a bachelor's degree. If you think about the sector that we work in, most survival leaders do not have access, do not have bachelor's degrees, not because they're not intelligent enough to get one, but because some of them just did not have the time, did not have access, but the knowledge that they have is equivalent to a bachelor's degree. So we changed our hiring practices, and right now we do not, for certain positions, we're looking at the different positions and saying, does this position actually require a bachelor's degree? And we are also just asking people about life experience, work experience as part of what we can do to make sure that people are accessible. Language is another thing that's a
Mhm.
huge thing, that's exclusive, that's
Yeah.
difficult. We've really been questioning like the language that we use and how that show care, doesn't it show care. We have had to review and really think about how we pay people and how we work with people. We are a hybrid organization as a result of COVID and other things, and I think we are going to remain the same. But we started having conversations about working conditions. That this makes sense, and really talking about what does it mean to really think about trauma-informed principles in action within the organization.
So what are some of the significant challenges that you faced in counter trafficking efforts, especially when addressing the needs of diverse and vulnerable populations?
I think one of the key issues is an us versus what I call an us versus them mentality,
Mm.
where like when you talk about inclusion and diversity, we have a tendency of talking, and that's the reason why I talk about movements, because we have a tendency of thinking about a table, and in most cases our a table has limited seats, right? And therefore, when you say, let's include impacted communities, let's work with impacted communities, whether people tell you or not, the first thought is that who's going to lose their position in the table, right? Who's going, and it really breeds that us versus them mentality. While
Yeah.
if we speak about a movement, it's that we are expanding this. We are no longer sitting at tables. We're expanding this. Everyone is needed to address this issue. So when you bring in impacted people, it doesn't challenge whoever has been doing this work or question whoever has been doing this work. It's just that we need more people, and actually we need to include impacted people. So I think for me, the challenge has really been that us versus them, the fact
Yeah.
that people see that as, when you speak about inclusion, when you speak about diversity, when you speak about, that's what it brings up. I think it's really been also difficult to have conversations around harm, and the
Wow.
fact that whether we like it or not, good intentions are not always enough. And some of the things, the solutions, the things that we've been doing, within communities that are impacted have actively been harmful.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
doesn't mean make you a bad person. It
Yeah.
doesn't make you a mean person. It just means it's been harmful, and an acknowledgement, a recognition, and a willingness to change and learn and do things better is important, right? But then
It's
in
critical.
most cases it becomes very defensive, right? It almost
Mm.
becomes personal. People think that you're personally attacking them, and
Yeah.
it's not really a personal attack. So for me, that has been a huge challenge. The system in general is getting used to thinking that the thinking and knowledge and ways of working of impacted communities,
Right.
because the system was not designed for impacted. Like, for example, I give a really good example. I tell people that for most African communities, oral literature, oral traditional, oral stories are a core part of who we are, right? Stories
Yes.
are a core part of how we share knowledge, how we generate knowledge, how things move. But then
Yeah.
when you think about how we currently generate knowledge and we currently store knowledge, it's not, oral is not one of the ones that's recognized as evidence and everything. Most of the
Yeah.
knowledge you have to put it in a research paper, a policy,
Mhm.
which is more geared towards a very different. So I think the fact that we still have to fix those things is
Yeah.
also a challenge, because my evidence, because it's given in an oral way, in a traditional, in the way my people do it, then is not evidence until a white person comes and writes it down in a research paper.
Mm. Yeah. That's a real issue. That is a very
Yeah.
big problem.
Yes.
Wow. So, can you discuss a particular program or initiative that you believe has significantly advanced the cause of modern day slavery with a focus on how it addressed diversity and inclusion?
I think that I want to say people are trying different things at the
Mm-hmm.
moment that I believe are are going to be important. I really, at this point, really want to commend the survivor-led organizations like
Mm,
Azadi, like National Survivor Alliance, the National Survivor Network in the US, Survivor Alliance. There are so many survivor communities that have
mhm.
really been pushing the boundaries for years, really working for more than the past 15 years, really trying to make sure that survivors are included and advocacy as far as that is concerned. I
Mm,
think some organizations, I commend some of the work that my colleagues at Freedom Fund are trying to do with the Survivor Leadership Fund. That's commendable. The US government just started funding survivor-led organization. I think that's going to create some significant changes. There are small bits here and there, and I think
mhm.
those are going to be important. But I also look forward to the work that the Global Fund is going to be doing, actively supporting building capacity of survivor-led organizations and funding
Yes.
survivor-led organizations. So I think we are moving in the right direction. It's slow, but we are moving in the right direction.
Oh, that's really good to know. The fight against modern slavery requires collaboration. How do you build and maintain strong partnerships across the stakeholders to mobilize resources effectively?
That is a difficult question. That is a difficult question because I think resources are a huge part of why people don't want to collaborate. And then
Mm,
I know by now I will sound like a broken record if I keep saying this. And I think the reason why there's such a huge competition, right, for resources is really we don't have movement thinking. We really
right.
have organizational thinking. It's my organization against your organization. But if we
Yeah.
think about the fact, if we think about how our movement operates and that we are what you're building you basically pushes what I'm doing together. And if we think again, as I said, the movement thinking basically tells me that your survival is embedded in mine, and therefore your organization needs to survive so that mine survives. And I think that thinking is still not there. I have to be very honest. There's a
Yeah.
lot of competition, and I feel like there are a lot of real conversations that need to happen for
Right.
that to actually happen
Yeah.
because people are not thinking in terms of building a movement, people are thinking in terms of building their own individual organizations.
That's the
And we
problem.
need to get and we need to get out of that. I say all the time, I am committed to the cause, not the organization. If tomorrow I believe that GFEMs, you know, uh, it makes sense for us to join, to stop, or anything we serve. I think we should be able to do that.
Mhm.
Organizations shouldn't continue simply for the sake of continuing.
Yeah.
Organizations should be of service to the movement. And I feel like because we are not having those conversations of what it means to be in a
Mm.
movement, what it means to work together collaboratively towards a common goal, uh, I feel like there's still a lot of work to be done. But
Lot of
yes,
work.
I'm trying, and there are some people I've already started having honest conversations with, and I hope
Okay.
that we can continue doing that.
Yeah, that's always going to be the challenge in the nonprofit social impact world. There's so much work to be done, but organizations are competing and not collaborating. And then that becomes a big weakness in terms of getting the work done. So there's still a lot to be done in that space. So, in your view, what are the most innovative approaches that are currently being used in the fight against modern day slavery? What can you share with us in terms of the work?
I think in terms of innovation, definitely working and including survivors meaningfully is is absolutely, while it seems like an obvious thing that we should have done, I think it's important. My fear there, though, is that uh, people people might be tokenized, and this might be just again something that people are doing to get funds, and then once donors stop leaning towards survival-led work, that it stops. I hope that that's not the case. I hope that we continue doing that. I think some of the another innovative way is just collaborative programming, when two or three organizations are coming together and they're focusing on their strengths as opposed to competing with each other, and really working together deeply in a space. I think that it is absolutely commendable.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like one of the issues also with our space, the modern slavery space, is that we really don't talk about root causes. We don't talk about the fact that, this issue is connected to so many other issues. It becomes
Yes,
really messy when you start talking about like racism, when you start talking about gender inequality. Yet these are the things that cause modern slavery. So for
yes,
me, part of the innovation is also that cross movement work, and people willing to admit that we are not going to address the issue of trafficking by working only on trafficking as a crime, but we'll have
mhm.
to talk about the vulnerabilities and how to address root causes.
So, as a trained teacher and an advocate for continuous learning, how do you see education playing a role in both preventing modern slavery and promoting diversity and inclusion?
I love education, and I think I've always said that if I know that it's time for me to give up when I don't think that people can be educated,
Oh,
people
wow.
can learn. I'll know that it's time for me to give up. If I know that I'm done, if I don't think that it's a solution. So one, I think just modern slavery is, as I said, it's complex, right? So education is really important in helping people understand. So one of the things is just helping people understand its connection, helping people understand why it's happening, helping people understand, vulnerabilities. So education is key
Yes,
really, really key in prevention. Also
yes,
keen prevention in the sense that we know that right now, as I said, to operate the systems of production, of accessing work and everything, we
yes,
need people need to be educated, right? And
yeah,
most of the people impacted, whether I like it or not, most of the people impacted by this issue are people who formal education have not had access to formal education. So formal
yeah,
education becoming important as, for addressing this.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think I think in terms of protection, right, that if people have degrees, if people understand this, again, just an articulation of values and articulation of rights, people who understand their rights have the ability to be more resilient, to fight, to stand for their rights. So I think education, all in all, there's just a continuum of so many things that it can do. And also just for us who, apart from impacted people, for us who are in the movement and are trying to do solidarity work,
mhm,
education allows us to learn better ways to do things. I
yes,
really like people who, one of the things I say I admire the most in people is curiosity, because
mhm,
I feel like it's curious people always have the ability to learn and change, even if
yeah,
they're on the wrong track. Curiosity will save you. So I think it's really important for us to encourage, especially as practitioners, to have curiosity so that we are consistently improving the services that we are offering or improving the ways that we are working to address this issue.
Yeah, it's interesting because unless you are willing to explore and go into spaces where you are not familiar with something, you will never learn anything new. And education is really a key that unlocks the mind, it unlocks the cycle of poverty. I can see why your passion lies in education. So, what advice would you give to emerging leaders who aim to make an impact in the fight against modern slavery and wish to be of service in some way?
I think one, it's what I've consistently been, what we've just said. One,
Mm,
approach this with curiosity, right?
yeah,
Because this is a complex issue you need to learn. I think it's very, very important from the get-go to know that you cannot do this alone. So this is
yeah,
not about individual leadership. This is about community leadership. This is about movement leadership. And it's really to ask ourselves, like, how do I become a movement leader? How do I do that? Which is very, very different. I'll say being a movement leader is very, very different from what is shared in public or what everyone celebrates as being a leader, being a leader out there. So being a movement leader really, really requires you to be in service of the community that you come from. And sometimes that service it's not pretty. It doesn't look like, showing up or being celebrated. It's consistently asking, what are the needs of the community I'm serving? And I think what is, for me, as a leader, that I've learned is that it's really extremely important for you to be rooted in your own values, to
yeah,
understand yourself, to know what drives you first before you embark on that journey. Because I
yeah,
feel like knowing yourself, really knowing yourself and being honest about who you are is what helps you be able to lead other people. I feel like not understand, if you don't have an understanding of who you are, as a
yeah.
leader, you have the ability to cause a lot of harm.
Yeah, that's actually quite scary because you can do more harm than good,
Yeah.
and you're not even aware of what you're doing. Wow. All right. So, my final question for you is all about the future. What are your hopes for the future of the fight against modern slavery? What do you think can be done on a global level?
My hopes is that we will stop existing in asylum. We'll
Mm,
open the doors and really make this issue the cross movement issue that it is, and
mm,
really be expansive, really, really be expansive.
mm,
Because to address this issue, we need more people. And
yeah,
I think there's very few of us. So my hope is that we are more expansive, that we are able to invite more people and we are able to welcome more people into this sector so that it becomes a movement. My hope is also that that it's a movement impacted people compete. We continue to prioritize. We don't lose focus of why we have this movement, and that's really to address the injustice that has happened to impacted communities, and
yeah,
therefore they get to say what that is. They get to define justice, and we get to think about it, and that we just, again, for me, shared humanity is such, especially right now with where the world is, where it
mm,
almost feels like we've forgotten what it means to be human beings first. Like before anything else, before I'm a advocate against modern slavery or anything, I'm a human being, and really, really making shared humanity core part of how we operate, for
yeah,
me, would really, really be important, because I think we are at a place where we need to go back to the basics. We
yeah.
really need to go back
Mm.
to the basics, because we are even losing the basics.
And there's a lot of work to be done. Well, thank you so much for coming online and sharing this important information with us. You know, a lot of people are out there not knowing the challenges, the dynamics that are faced in these circumstances, and your work is truly commendable. Thank you for everything you're doing to try and stop modern day slavery, Sophie.
Thank you so much, Gertrude, for having a conversation with me on this.
It's an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everybody who's tuned in today. The
Yeah.
Her Story Circle is bringing you stories from women from all over the world, dynamic women who are uplifting, inspiring, energizing you to change the world and leave it a better place than we found it. So come back again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing woman. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Sophie, thanks again for the interview. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep making